Like, who has been the most exciting person for you tonight?
Oh my God.
Besides me. Took the words out of my mouth. Besides,
I'm a narcissist.
You know that feeling when somebody gets handed the keys to the kingdom and somehow still manages to set the whole place on fire? That's basically how this played out. Rachel Zegler didn't just have a messy press tour. She became the center of one of Disney's most expensive misfires ever. The live-action Snow White wasn't some small gamble. This was supposed to be a crown jewel release. Instead, it turned into a financial sinkhole that executives reportedly scrambled to control behind the scenes. We're talking about a production whose total costs reportedly climbed north of $300 million when you factor in marketing, reshoots, and delays. That's blockbuster territory. That's franchise launch money. And somehow, it spiraled into one of the biggest live-action disappointments the studio has ever faced. To understand how wild this is, look at the comparisons. This film reportedly cost more than Rogue One, more than the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and sat in the same financial universe as Beauty and the Beast, which crossed the billion-dollar mark globally. That's the level of expectation Disney had. They weren't aiming for decent. They were expecting dominance. Instead, they got backlash before the movie even hit theaters. Now let's rewind. Rachel Zegler's rise was fast. She was personally selected by Steven Spielberg to star in West Side Story, which instantly positioned her as one of Hollywood's promising new faces. From there, she landed roles in major franchises like The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and high-profile studio projects. She had momentum. She had industry backing. She had the spotlight fully locked in. When Disney cast her as Snow White, it should have been the ultimate career launchpad. But then, the interviews started. Instead of leaning into nostalgia, Rachel openly criticized the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She called aspects of it outdated. She described the prince as a stalker. She emphasized that this new version would move away from the classic love story entirely. Now, having opinions about a nearly 90-year-old film isn't shocking. But when you are literally the face of a remake built on the emotional attachment people have to that original story, publicly dragging it during the promotional tour hits different. Fans didn't see it as modernization. They saw it as disrespect. And perception is everything when you're asking audiences to spend money. Clips from those interviews spread like wildfire. Every soundbite became debate fuel. And instead of calming things down, the social media presence only amplified it. When the first trailer dropped, instead of keeping the focus on the visuals or the music, Rachel used the moment to share strong political opinions directly under promotional posts. That shifted the conversation immediately. The film stopped being about fantasy and magic. It became about controversy and division. Reports later claimed Disney executives had to step in, request post removals, and even bring in social media training to prevent further PR blowups. That's not normal blockbuster behavior. That's crisis mode. Behind the scenes, things reportedly weren't smooth either. Early test screenings allegedly left executives nervous. Some viewers felt the new version strayed too far from what made the original special. Romance elements that had been downplayed were reportedly reworked and partially restored. Reshoots stacked up, budgets climbed. Delays stretched out the timeline. Every adjustment meant more money, more pressure, and more headlines questioning whether the film was already in trouble. By the time the final version locked in, expectations were sky high and skepticism was even higher. Then, March 2025 arrived. Opening weekend numbers came in at about $42 million domestically. That wasn't just below early optimistic projections. It was even lower than the studio's reduced expectations. International markets didn't provide a major rescue either. The global total eventually landed around $205 million before the film exited theaters in roughly 4.5 weeks. For a regular mid-budget movie, that could look decent. For a project costing over $300 million all in, that's devastating. Here's the part people sometimes forget. Studios don't keep every dollar from ticket sales. Theaters take roughly half. So from that $205 million worldwide gross, Disney's actual return was reportedly closer to $102 million. Even accounting for tax incentives and rebates, the math was brutal. Industry estimates placed the final loss at around $170 million. That's not just a flop. That's a cautionary tale written in giant red ink. Online reaction was relentless. Reddit threads dissected every interview clip. Comment sections were filled with side-by-side screenshots of early confident press quotes next to box office headlines. Memes flooded timelines. People debated whether the backlash was overblown or whether it was the predictable result of clashing with a nostalgic fan base. Either way, the damage was done. The narrative stuck. The film became shorthand for how not to handle a remake rollout. Even Disney's post-release strategy felt quieter than usual. Unlike other live-action princess adaptations, there wasn't a massive theme park character rollout tied to this version of Snow White. For a company that usually capitalizes on every character opportunity, that absence didn't go unnoticed. It signaled caution. It signaled recalibration. And here's the bigger industry question. Was this only about one actress? Or was it about franchise fatigue, shifting audience tastes, and the growing skepticism toward live-action remakes in general? Because by 2025, audiences had already seen numerous reimaginings. Some succeeded, some stumbled. But this one became symbolic. It wasn't just about box office numbers. It was about branding, messaging, and the fragile balance between modernization and nostalgia. Rachel Zegler's career didn't vanish overnight. Hollywood rarely works that way, but momentum shifted. Instead of being the rising golden girl with endless franchise potential, her name became attached to a high-profile misfire. And in an industry obsessed with optics, that label sticks for a while. Fair or not, perception drives casting conversations, investor confidence, and public hype. In the end, this wasn't just about a single film missing its target. It was about how massive budgets, social media strategy, audience expectations, and public commentary collided all at once. When those elements move in opposite directions, even the most iconic fairy tale can struggle to survive at the box office. And in this case, the numbers told a story louder than any press tour ever could. And here's where it gets even colder. You can walk into Disney parks right now and meet both versions of the Little Mermaid characters, take pictures, buy the merch, the whole experience. Ariel? Everywhere, smiling, singing, fully embraced. But the live-action Snow White, practically invisible. No big character rollout, no massive celebration. It was like Disney quietly slid that chapter into a drawer and shut it fast. Reports even claimed unsold merchandise ended up at discount chains like Dollar Tree and Five Below. That's a brutal fall for what was supposed to be a prestige fairy tale reboot. But the wildest part? Rachel didn't exactly go silent after the backlash. Instead of stepping back and recalibrating, she doubled down. In later interviews, she suggested a lot of the criticism came from unfair standards placed on her. She was even featured by Glamour magazine as one of their Women of the Year, where she talked about actors not needing boundaries when it comes to political expression. She brushed off the backlash like it was nothing, saying criticism rolls right off her. That confidence might sound bold, but critics argue that lack of restraint is exactly what made the situation spiral in the first place. Fast forward to 2026, and the comeback attempt looks very different from the trajectory she once had. Instead of leading billion-dollar franchises, she's attached to a smaller indie comedy called She Gets It From Me. No disrespect to indie films at all, but that's a major shift from Disney tentpoles, DC-level hype, and The Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes franchise buzz. She's also doing theater work in London's West End, which is respectable and artistically rich, but it's not the same red carpet blockbuster lane she seemed destined for just a few years ago. That's a noticeable pivot. Then there were reports floating around that she might portray Gloria Estefan in a biopic. Sounds huge, right? Except the project reportedly isn't fully written, funded, or officially greenlit yet. So at this stage, it's more concept than concrete production. Some industry watchers see that kind of announcement as hopeful momentum. Others see it as PR smoke meant to signal demand. Either way, it's not a locked-in franchise juggernaut. Here's the harsh Hollywood reality. When a project you headline loses around $170 million, executives get cautious. Studios are businesses first. Investors don't forget numbers like that. Fair or unfair, once your name becomes tied to a high-profile financial loss, casting conversations change. Momentum cools. Meetings feel different. That's just how the machine works. What makes this whole saga so ironic is how avoidable parts of it might have been. If the promotional tour had focused purely on the magic, the visuals, the music. If the messaging had stayed tightly on the film instead of broader debates, the movie might still have struggled. Let's be real, live-action remakes have been facing fatigue for years. But it probably wouldn't have carried the same historic disaster label. The perception snowballed long before opening weekend even arrived. Now the bigger picture comes into play. Disney isn't slowing down on remakes. They're moving forward with projects like Moana and Tangled. The strategy hasn't changed much. The formula is still there. Big budgets, nostalgia hooks, reimagined classics. The difference? There's likely a lot more sensitivity around casting choices and press tour messaging after this experience. Studios pay attention when numbers hit that hard. So where does that leave Rachel Zegler? For now, it looks like a reset phase. Indie films, theater, smaller scale projects. That doesn't mean a career is over. Hollywood loves a comeback story. But it does mean the fast-track, franchise-dominating, next big movie star narrative has slowed way down. Those early cosigns from heavyweights like Steven Spielberg opened massive doors. Keeping them open requires strategy, timing, and sometimes knowing when not to speak. That balance is tough in the social media era. At the end of the day, some fans believe she was unfairly targeted. Others think the backlash was predictable. Maybe it was a mix of both. What's undeniable is the scale of the financial fallout and how quickly public perception can flip in the entertainment world. 1 minute, you're the future of Hollywood. The next, you're trending for all the wrong reasons. That switch happens fast. But I want to know what you think. Did Rachel deserve the heat, or was this just bad timing mixed with remake fatigue? Drop your thoughts down below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like, subscribe, share this with your friends, drop your comments down below, and I'll see you on the next one.